actors who are also stand-up comedians. We've got the privilege of working with a lot of people here who are also headlining stand-up comedians who have done all the festivals and done all the clubs, and of course doing our Comedy Alley shows. But the thing I love about stand-ups is they're completely bold and fearless with their strong choices, and with their character choices. Whereas sometimes I find quote unquote straight actors will be a little more timid or reserved, or a little more like, tell me what to do, or what should I do, or what do you think? I don't know if that's a reliance on a director or a writer. Whereas a stand-up comedian, most times, with the exception of like a big Netflix special, you're the writer, you're the performer, and you're the director of your own show every night when you're a stand-up performer. And you got to be big and bold enough to capture an entire audience. You got to be big enough to play to the back of the room. You have to be fearless enough to make yourself look like an idiot in front of a group of strangers as well. So I think the training of being a stand-up comedian for a lot of people, especially when it's a comedic, or what you'd call a comedic piece. And as we know from learning with Tom Todoroff, everything is everything, and comedy has drama and drama has comedy. However, if it's specifically something that is over the top comedy, stand-ups always crush those because they're completely fearless. And that's part of the reason I'm sure Aisha was amazing doing that, is she didn't have any fear in being too big, you know?
No.
I'm going to be right back. I got to just plug in my laptop. So hold on the fort. I'll be back in 30 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, it's such a privilege to see actors go from their humble beginnings to like the final take that we do, because it is completely night and day. And it's so fun to see that progression. And I was talking to someone about it recently, because I think it's so wonderful that we're able to do this now. We're able to take the time with our auditions. We're able to apply so many of the things that we've learned. And I think Lars is right in a lot of respects about stand-up comedians. They trust themselves. And I think there's a lot of straight actors that get so heavily reliant on the words and the text, and having that as almost a crutch, that they're not able to completely lose that. And like, there's a lot of times where you'll be like, fuck, I fucked the line. And like that's fine. But like, don't worry about what the line is. Focus on your thoughts behind that line. Right. Focus on the intention that's going into it. Focus on what you need from that other character. And that's what stand-up comics are really great at, is they're able to trust themselves and just go for it. And like, just focus on just doing it. And that's a great thing, is like, they're just able to go. And that's so fun to see. And I think a lot of actors can incorporate that sort of philosophy into what they're doing already, and it would help them so tremendously.
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Comedians also have I believe, a stronger sense of communication and competition as well. When you're a stand-up and it's just you on stage, but there's an audience of 50 or 100 or 1,000 people, you develop a real muscle of message sent, message received, and sensing the room. You say something and you can really sense them. If assuming you're seasoned, you can sense when something is awkward is happening, or when something doesn't land, or when it does. You get a sense of like, oh, I can go even harder at this because those people are loving that. So I'm just going to drill it in. And I think there's a lack of a fear factor that sometimes is still in. And like you said, it's not really about, it's like, yeah, the words are the words and the text is the text, but it's about bringing that off of the page and transcending that as a character and inhabiting this character and bringing it to real life and personalizing it. And stand-ups do that. And stand-ups are also great storytellers. Typically vocally, they are very strong just because of all the reps too. Whereas especially it's different. If a TV film actor, if their training is based in theater, they may have a lot of the things that stand-ups have as well. But if the TV film actor who hasn't done a lot of theater and hasn't been on stage and hasn't been in live rooms, I feel like that's like the number one fear for everyone. That's like public speaking or doing stand-up is everyone's number one fear. Whereas if you're mic'd up and you're in a tight, closed set, that's not as fear creating potentially as doing stand-up or being on stage in a room full of people. So shout out to stand-up comics, including you,
and
Brandon.
theater actors.
And theater actors. Yeah. And if you're a TV film actor who hasn't done stand-up or theater, then I would suggest you got to do both. And as an actor, what's the saying? It's like TV and film will make you money, but theater will make you good.
Yep. Because
there's no cut. And what was my line again? Oh yeah, right. What was my line? Oh, sorry. Can we do that again?
Yeah.
It's like once you walk out there in a theater show, you're what was the word? You're metaphorically naked on stage, and there's no hiding once you start a theater show. It's especially if you're out there a lot.
I think sometimes the trap that you get into with theater shows is like you think that everything will have this thorough through line. And I know one of the biggest adjustments for me coming from theater school to professional acting is like that's not how things are shot on set.
Oh yeah, you mean in
like they're not shot in order.
Yeah,
like,
all out of order.
Yeah, like in theater you have a progression. You have it from page 1 to page whatever. But like on film and on set, you're shooting page 96, or you're doing this stunt first because that's one of the most expensive shots in the scene, or like
that's interesting, because in theater a lot of that stuff can develop organically if it's a build and a build and a build, and conflict is growing and growing till the point where it bursts at the climax of the scene or the climax of the show. Whereas you might need to walk into set on day one of a TV shoot and be like, this is the big fight scene, or this is the climax of the movie that we're shooting it on day one.
Even the movie that I just finished, like I only met the person that I was best friends with 10 minutes before we actually started shooting.
Right. And then you have to have best friend chemistry immediately.
Yeah, exactly.
No rehearsals.
Nope.
That's the other downside to TV and film is often there's no rehearsal period. You're just thrust in there and you're okay. Here's your co-star. Here's your co-star. This is the scene. This is where the camera is. There's a blocking. We'll do 1 rehearsal, 2 rehearsals for blocking.
And I think that's where Tom's thing of you have to know it so well that you can't get it wrong comes in so handy, because that's how I felt. I felt like I knew it so well. I couldn't get it wrong. I know what it's like to be the best friend of someone. I know what it's like to do that. And like, once you're able to step into that, do whatever exercises you needed to do to get there, but like find yourself there and then just make sure that you're ready to deliver at action. And I don't think that's a wrong thing to do.
Yeah. And for TV and film, if you're not super prepared and you go in there, then just with changes and blocking and location changes or last minute line changes and crew, lights, camera, and all the action and sometimes the intimidation of like, oh shit, there's 500 people here and this is costing us $100,000 an hour to do this. All of a sudden your lines can go out the window if you're not super prepped. And what you want is if the director or your co-star comes up and starts talking to you about a scene, you want to have it all like, you know exactly. You don't have to be like, oh, let me check the script and oh yeah, right, I know what you're talking about there. It should just be like you know exactly what you're doing in every scene. You know all your lines. You know the other person's lines probably, and so that you just have it all right there. And then in that heat of the moment, lights, camera, action, when the stakes are so high, you're cool as a cucumber because you've done it 500 times at home. If you haven't had the rehearsal period, and that's the nice thing with a lot of theater shows is often you might have 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks of rehearsals. And so you've done it, like you may have done it 500 times just in the rehearsals by the time you get there. But you need that extra rehearsal, because when you do it in a theater show, it's action and there's no cut until curtain basically, and you got to just run through the whole thing. And there's no worse feeling than being in a theater show and being on stage and locking eyes with another actor, and you realize that you've like cut a section or you've jumped a section, or you see in their eyes that just that blank moment where it's just like, I don't know where we are right now. And that's the worst feeling ever. But that's also what's fun about theater too, is because it's live, and no matter what, you got to roll with it. I remember I did a show where one of the actors wasn't quite there with his lines. He was maybe a little green and maybe didn't realize how much prep it did take, especially once you get the audience and the lights and the sound cues and the props and the set and everything. And there was a few times where he was on stage and I could see it, like the deer in headlights in his eyes. And because I've got stand-up and improv background, which is always great as an actor, that you have that improv background, you just know, okay, you know, you're out to the scene, you know where the scene's supposed to go, you know what you want, you know your relationship, you know what you're fighting for, you know what this scene is about, and how it like has to wrap up. So then I was able to, I recognize in his eyes, oh fuck, he's lost and doesn't know where he is. And then I would step up and make something up, like, so tell me about, or, well, weren't you on your way to? I'm like, if I'm feeding him his line on stage without
anyone knowing,
without trying to be so obvious to it. There was one funny time, and I won't name names, but and I mean, even if I did, I'm sure he'd be fine with it. But and this is a don't do in theater, is he was like, through his teeth, he was like, what's my line? Like, where are we? And we're only like, the front row is like, whatever, 6 feet away or 10 feet away, like in a room where you can hear all that. So it's like, in my head, I'm like, they can hear you. This isn't TV, you know? Yeah, that was really fun. That was fun for me because I knew I was always the safety net, and the rest of the cast knew I was that too. So we joke about it backstage. We were like, oh, well, if we drop something, Lars will pick us up. And that pretty much was the way it would go in many of the scenes where I would have to step in and be like, okay, so what are we doing here? Don't you have to go here and you got to go there? And weren't you going to ask me about this?
I just imagine you're off stage, you're like having a coffee or something, and then it's just like, you just hear dead silence. You're like, oh, all right, I guess I have to go on. There's no context for me to do it, but whatever.
I know you're saying that as a joke. That actually might have happened one time where I wasn't even supposed to be there, and I was like waiting in the wings, and I had to go out and do something. Yeah. Yeah, it really makes me miss. I after a pandemic, I do really miss theater, and I mean, obviously, I love TV and film. I love the money attached to TV and film, and it's super cool because you do TV and film, and it's forever once they get the shot and once they lock picture and edit it. But it does lack some of the magic of theater and the excitement and that butterfly moment, and the idea, especially if it's not being recorded, that what is happening right now or what just happened is something that is gone into the ether forever, except for the people who experienced it firsthand. Like that was a secret magical moment just for us, and then it's gone forever, versus the permanency of TV and film combined with the tediousness of hurry up and wait. And every time they got to do a camera setup or a location change, you're really spending probably 80% of your time on a film set not acting, and most of it is hanging out, waiting around. Maybe you're rehearsing with your scene partner if you're lucky. But it's a TV film set is more for crew, does way more work than an actor does, in my opinion. Way harder to be a crew member than an actor on a TV and film set, I think.
Yes. So
they
thank
work
you to all the crew members out there.
Yeah,
you do God's work. Thank you.
Long days too. Long days for them. 12-hour, 14, 16, 18, 20-hour days. Somewhat ridiculous, actually. Hopefully they change some of those labor standards, because it's unsafe. You can't have people like working 6 days a week, 18, 20-hour days, and then expect them to drive home at the end of a shift when they're getting no sleep for 3 months straight. It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy.